Hello everyone, welcome to the start of this course. My name is Jack and I'm a VFX artist who works at nDreams. This course is a level entry course about VFX and I will guide you through start to finish on installing and setting up a games engine called Unreal Engine to create a very first simple effect. As you can see, it's some sort of sparks. Speaking of my job itself, if you see anything like a fireball or waterfall or lightning, any sort of futuristic, medieval explosions, anything like that, that is actually created by a VFX artist and is a separate job entirely in the games industry, just like you have separate jobs for things such as lighting artists, prop artists, environment artists, and so forth. I'm just going to go through some of my ArtStation projects real quickly. So my very first one was one of my personal favourites and one of my personal projects, which was the Across the Spider-Verse movie Portal, the second film. In this second video, as I'll leave it playing in the background, is just more of a little cinematic one where you get closer towards the portal and it feels like you're going inside it. Now, VFX as a whole does take time. Now, depending what it is, it could take you a few hours. It could take days to weeks. Purely depends on how much time you have. If you've got a full-time industry job, then you're going to have less free time to do the sort of personal work like this. If you're interested at all on how I achieve some of these effects, and you know a little bit more about Unreal Engine going into this, here is some breakdowns and some text. What I did and how I achieved certain effects, as it is built up of lots of different components together. Now, the next one I'm going to briefly talk about is this one, which is called the Tactical Brick, which I did for the Medieval Back and Forth Challenge, for the specifically ArtStation Challenge, where I managed to come third place. And just like the previous one, you can see some breakdowns, except I did this one slightly different through the use of a video. We will be using Unreal Engine in this course as well, which is very popular in the games industry. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to the first video of this module, and this is a guide on how to install Unreal Engine. Of course, that won't take too long, so we're going to dive right into the Unreal Engine and we are going to start looking at the HUD and how to navigate around it, the outliner, and also sort of where the VFX stuff is, so you can get a brief understanding of it. So first of all you need to do is hop onto Chrome, Google, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, whatever one you're using, and just type in download Unreal Engine. Now if you just click on the first link, it brings you to the Epic Games Unreal Engine page. And as you can see, it says download Unreal Engine. There's a step 1, step 2, step 3. Now, Epic Games are the creators of Unreal Engine, so you're going to need the Epic Games launcher. If you have played any Epic Games, such as Fortnite, you will already have it, so you won't need to do this step. Now, once you have installed the Epic Games launcher, which I will not do as I already have it, so you just need to click this. You're then going to head over to the Epic Games launcher and you'll need to create an Epic Games account. This is just because Epic Games accounts are needed for all the games that Epic Games allows you to install, including to access Unreal Engine. Completely free and everything, you just need to create an account with an email address and password. Then what you need to do is find the Epic Games store and then locate Unreal Engine, and then, or actually to be honest, there is actually an Unreal Engine tab which I shall show you in a moment. And then all you need to do is head over and click install for whatever version you will require. So I will just open up my Epic Games real quick. Now as you can see, we have here some, this is what the Epic Games website looks like, or app rather. And as you can see, we have store where you can find assets and games and a lot of things, and then you have your library where is everything you've installed. For instance, I have my Unreal Engine and Fortnite, and then you have your Unreal Engine tab. Now this is where you'll find your Unreal Engine info and to show all the versions you have. So if you go to Unreal Engine then click library, these are all the versions I've got. So I've got 4.21, which I actually uninstalled. It's just here because I haven't exited it yet, which I will. Then I've got 5.2, 5.3 and 5.4.4. Now the reason I have all of these is because I've made different projects on different versions, and one thing you can't do is you can't open new projects in old versions, but you can open old projects in newer versions, if that sort of makes sense. If you're looking for a newer version, for instance, as you saw in the news, 5.5 is available. All you need to do is hit the engine version, and as you can see, it pops up with the latest version. But you can also select this if you want to go back to, for instance, 5.1 or 5.0. For all these tutorials, I will be using 5.3 as it is the most stable and what I was using at the time, so I thought I would keep it the same. You, of course, can use any version you like as long as it is Unreal 5 or above. Personally, I would prefer to only drop it as low as 5.1, and then you can go all the way up to 5.5 if you wish. I personally would suggest 5.4 because 5.5 is still sort of like fluctuating with its with stuff being added and so forth, and some HUD stuff might be slightly confusing compared to the previous versions, as they have made some big changes in 5.5. But without further ado, when we have installed our version, it's going to probably take you, depending on your bandwidth of your internet, it will probably take you between maybe 45 minutes to an hour, maybe longer, like an hour and a half, as I said, depending how good your internet is. Mine is really slow, so it does take me the longer time. Now, if you've had any projects before, you can see that they all come up along here as some recent open projects. In this case, we're just going to open a brand new project, and once you click launch, I've already launched it and I've put it to show you here. Now the reason I've done this is because it was taking a couple minutes to load, and I didn't want to just keep you guys waiting, so I've done that myself. Now what's really good about this as well is you have option to open some default pages for whatever you're using Unreal Engine for. Obviously the top one being games, which is what we're going to use. Then we've got film, video and live events, architecture, automotive, product design and manufacturing, and simulation. Now when you hit games, it gives you some blank or some sort of maps that you can use. So this one's quite useful because you can just play and play as a gun and shoot around and knock things over. This is a nice one to test third person. Then you've got top down, vehicle, virtual reality and handheld AR. You want to make sure that you're on blueprinting because that is what everyone uses, and you can choose whether to require starter content. I suggest having it on, but it could get a little messy, and in our case we won't necessarily need it, so you won't need to have it on for any of this. Then down here we have the project location, and we also have the project name, so I will just name this test map, something like that. And then as you can see, our blank is going to be this sort of sandy biome, which is completely fine to deal with for the moment since we are just going through the project. So if we hit create, it is now creating the project. It will take a little bit time to load because it's just initializing and sorting out the compiling shaders and loading all of the not starter assets because we didn't enable them, but it still needs to generate the world, pretty much like you would do if you started a new level on an open world game and it needs time to generate the world for that. So if we just wait for a couple of seconds, hopefully, yep, almost 100%. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, there's a lot to be on the screen at once, and honestly, super simple stuff. So I will go through it one by one, at least the most important parts. So for example, you move around with WASD, nearly forgot that for a second, WASD while holding right click. So if you hold right click and then move around, you can sort of move around like so. Now if you want to zoom in on something, you just have to go over to it, and then if you think, oh, I'm going a bit too fast, as you're moving you can use the scroll wheel and it will slow down your camera, and if you push the scroll wheel forward, it will speed your camera up, like so. And these little things here are to represent the player start and also to represent where it is, which is close enough to 0, 0, 0, which is this skylight here. Now, if you want to focus on something, you can hit F and it will focus, and then you can sort of look around and see what it is. And yeah, so those are the basic movement system. You also have Q on your keyboard to go down, or R on your keyboard, E on your keyboard to go up. But mainly I just sort of go up and down as I move along. Here is where the warnings sort of pop up. As you can see, this is just giving a warning about actors need to be rebuilt because it's a default map. So that's not going to be any of our concern. So, to give a basic overview, we have ourselves our top windows where we have the play button. We have this button which allows us to add in some lights, some basic shapes, like a cube, and we could just drag it in and it goes to 0, 0, 0, like so. And we can move it around. We can also hit R, we can scale it, similar to Maya, and we can rotate it with E, like so. Pretty much exactly the same tools as Maya, slightly different to Blender, but yeah, the same concept is there. So after we've sort of had a look around here, we then have the outliner. So the outliner consists of everything we have in this current level. So for example, the directional light is here. We've got the exponential height fog, which is set to be under the map. And then we have ourselves our sky atmosphere, which is also set to 0, 0, 0. Our skylight, the sphere, the volumetric cloud, and the cube we place down, which my camera's going really fast, so I'll slow that down. And then of course we've got the player start, where we can obviously hit play, and we can probably we can move around and play our game. But of course there's no character setup, so obviously I'm just sort of flying around. Now, moving on, we're sort of going from top to left, and then bottom right, and then bottom left. So, in the details panel is where we have all of our transformations. So, where I said earlier about rotation, scale, and location, you can also adjust them to get more finer details around here. You can see the sort of static mesh it has, and you can see the material it uses, which is just a basic shape material. You can also find a lot more in here that are not necessarily used as much. The one I tend to use the most in case I am doing VFX with meshes is just the one in the lighting, which is cast shadow, and I would turn that off because I don't necessarily need the casting shadows, and it does sometimes make my effects look bad the way they're reflecting off of there. I'm going to leave that on for the moment, and that is the details panel in a brief description. Now this, I've left the main one, the content browser until the end because it is the main one we will be using, and this is, yeah, as it specifies, this is where the content is. If there was that starter content we've ticked on, we would find it all here. We could find some basic VFX and stuff like that. But since we're going to make ours from scratch, it's going to be added here. So if you right click, you have we have a ton of options here, and we're just going to start off with a brand new folder, and we'll just call this VFX, like so. And then we can open that folder and we can create more folders, we can create a bunch of stuff. So for example, a blueprint class, you can create a lot of different stuff. We won't need this at all, but just to get the anims correct and sort of know for when you're going into the industry, you will need to make sure these are correct. So for this one, it will be BP for blueprint, and then underscore whatever it may be, and in this case I'll just do test, and then you open it up and it will bring you a new window and it will give you a BP. But of course we're not going over this today, I just wanted to let you know. Then we have ourselves a level in case you need to create additional levels. This tends to be L underscore, but in this case I'm not going to do it because the basic level for now is perfectly fine. Then we have ourselves our material, which is going to be, as you guessed it, M underscore, and this is also going to be called test. And then we have ourselves our basic asset of Niagara system, which is exactly what we would like to use. Now, I am going to start by going over the Niagara system, and I'm going to then show you some defaults they have and just a little bit more information, and that should pretty much wrap up this video. So, first of all, we have ourselves 4 options. We can either select a system from some selected emitters, or select a system from a template of behavioral examples. So there's a bit more to them. Copy existing systems, or create some empty one. Now, so if I go here, for example, on the second one, you can see that we have libraries on. You can see that we have a couple of templates. Although I think because I don't have, let's go back actually. So there usually would be something there, but I think because I haven't got starter content turned on, they don't quite show. Obviously we have copy existing, which is to show us the ones we already have, and create empty, which obviously finishes and gives us an empty system, which is taking, but as you can see, it is empty, and we there's nothing in here, and it takes longer time to edit that, so we're not going to do that. So we're going to delete that, and we're going to go to Niagara system, and we're going to go to new system from selected emitters next, and we have all of these to choose from, and then we have our learning examples as well, which is where the more complicated ones are with different motions and so forth. Our parent emitters, which would be the ones where we're relating to, but of course we haven't made anything yet, so there's not going to be anything there. So for templates, I'm going to go, you've got some blowing particles, a bit for maybe if there's some dust going around sort of thing. You've got your confetti, your directional burst, which could be used for some like, you could turn them into sort of sparks. Your dynamic beam, not really used a lot. You have your empty to start completely fresh from not much, but a lot more than the other one, which I shall add that in to show you. Your fountain, which is what I'm going to be showing you. Your hanging particles, so a bit more like dust. Your burst. Recycle particles in view, have not seen that one before. Simple sprite burst, simple looping particle, another beam, and your upward mesh burst. So we're going to grab the fountain, and we're going to grab an empty, and we're going to finish. Now for Niagara system, it is NS underscore, and again I'm going to type in test. Now we're going to open this up, and we're just going to go over some brief things before we begin, so you won't have, you'll be a little bit more familiar with it. So if we just click on this little man, it means I've isolated it, and it means this one that even though I've clicked on it, it's not going to show. So whatever this is going to show in here. But as it says, it's an empty system. There is nothing in there apart from an initialized particle, which is to spawn the particle and the emitter state and the renderer itself. However, if I was to add in a spawn burst of 1, we get ourselves a particle here, and now we have ourselves a particle. So when we drag this into the scene, we have ourselves a particle. Now as you can see, the particle is stuck there and will only travel to the new location after, I believe, 5 seconds. The reason for that is because the particle is set to last 5 seconds. Now if I set this to 1 second and then I drag it, it's going to appear and die 1 second after its lifetime has expired. But to fix that it doesn't last long, we hit it back to 5 seconds to make it last longer so we can see it, and then hit in properties, hit local space. We now can drag the particle without any lag behind. We will be using both case scenarios, and of course in the videos I will go over them a lot more in detail, but for the moment that's how we are. I'm just going to show you that. Now, just to go over one more thing, is the fountain. Now, I'm going to isolate it as well because we don't want to use this anymore. The fountain is a great one to start with, because it already gives you a bunch of particles. They're already flying up in a velocity like matter, in a cone. They've got spawn rate on them, so they're consistently spawning. They've got gravity force. They've got a bit of drag to make them so they're not permanently the same falling rate. and they are spawning in a bit of a shaped location and are infinite. As you can see, we have ourselves some lovely... Oh, and they're already local space. So we have ourselves a lovely bit of fountain. Now, this, of course, is the most basic effect that they offer. You know, if we're going to make something a little bit more complicated, this is definitely a great way to start using the fountain, depending what you want to make. But again, you know, you could easily just say, oh, I don't necessarily want the particles to fall, and you could just either delete this or just turn it off, and in that way your particles now just fly up until they die or fade out at their lifetime given. So, I will be going over some more modules and Niagara in general, but for now this was more of an Unreal video. But of course, since this is a VFX course, I thought why not chuck in some knowledge about Niagara just to begin with, and just to get your head in gear for when we start the actual module in the next video. I hope you guys have found it relatively easy to install Unreal. Just remember that you need the Epic Games Launcher, and if you already have it due to some games you played on there, then just install it through the Epic Games Launcher, save yourself some time. And yeah, I hope Unreal Engine is very easy to understand and move around in. Of course, if not, there are, like, Unreal Engine has a ton of info on how to set things up or what things do online, because the program has been around for years. So yeah, hope to see you guys in the next video. Right, hello everyone, welcome to this new video following from the Unreal Engine install video, and today we are going to learn how to make some simple basic sparks in Unreal. This could be a two-part video depending how we get along. I will go into every detail as much as possible since it is a beginner course, so everything I go through is for people who have never opened Unreal before, and especially being Niagara itself, and I will explain as I go what I'm doing, what I'm adding, which means it could become a part 2. There could be a part 2 to this, which is absolutely no problem. They will just be broken up and you'll be able to see how we make it in the end. So first things first is I would just like to look at some references, which is always a great thing to do when you are making VFX. The reason for this is because even though you could be making a stylized game, it's always good to look at real life references, because even though the effect may look stylized and you have flat textures, you know, or it just looks flat colored, that sort of thing, you will still want to make it the same motion as if you were making realistic sparks. So if I actually put in GIF instead, and we can get some motions going. So I'll leave this one on the screen as I talk a bit more, but basically sparks, no matter whether you make them stylized for a stylized game, cartoon game, no matter whether you do it for a toon shader game or realistic game, they're going to act the same. The only difference between what sort of style you're making is how they look. The motion, the timing, everything like that is exactly the same. The only small difference is in video games, we use, we can and we can't use collision. So sometimes we may make sparks that don't have collision because collision is costly. So for performance reasons, and depending on the game we're making, we may just completely cut them. Now, of course, that might not be, in today's video, that won't be the case. I will make some collision sparks, and I'll make some sparks on how to sort of fake it as if they are sort of disappearing sort of thing. But back to the references. As you can see, this is a perfect representation of some embers that are coming from a fire camp, or should I say campfire, or just generally more hot sparks, sort of embers, when it comes to a good reference. The one major thing that these have that a lot of other references we may look at don't have is a lot of noise. Like, they move around quite a lot due to the wind and how they interact with the scene. How we do this in Niagara itself in Unreal, there is a module called Curl Noise Force, and it allows us to sort of add this wispy, swirly feeling, which I will show you when we get into the engine. Now, if we have a look at some other references, that is way too small. So, for example, Sparkler is made up of a ton of sparks just sort of pinging off of the end of the stick, and of course you've got like, okay, this is just a repeated GIF, so it's not that great, but you can imagine it being really random. I'm sure you've seen a sparkler before, but they're all very close together. So what makes a sparkler is the fact is it's very hot in the middle, as you can see. It's bright white, and then it sort of gets a little bit more orange and yellowish as it goes out. And to represent this in the game, we would make the lifetime really low, and then sort of compress the velocity so that it doesn't ping out too much, and then that would sort of give us that sort of sparkling look. We can have a look at how we would sort of make that today. I don't necessarily have a texture on me to sort of make a sparkler effect, but I can still use the sort of assets to just sort of give you a general stylized sparkler that we could look at making. The final one I'd like to look at is where is it? Oh, there it is. This one. So this is the sparks for if you were making a sort of for example, if you like this one here, this is sparks from a machine as you're sort of grinding or cutting away metal. As you can see, they're very directional, so the sparks are flying away from the machine, and then they sort of spurt out randomly. I would say randomly, but it's quite directional to the opposite side, as you can see there. And then of course you've got things like that is a terrible example. Do we have any better ones here? Let's try machine sparks GIF or GIF. Let's see what we got here. So again, these are like more machine. Oh, that's not machine one. These are more machine ones. That's not a great GIF whatsoever. Here's another example of a good GIF example, although it's going back and forth, which is a little annoying. I was trying to find. Oh, perfect. Here's a good spark one that I wanted to find. So this is the sort of ones we'll be making today. As you can see, it's someone using I think it's a blowtorch, and a lot of sparks are coming off of the blowtorch randomly, distributing downwards. And this is sort of what we're going to aim for today. And as you can see, the motion's pretty random, but it's in sort of a cone shape, as you can see, and how the size is different as well. You know, we always want to try and give everything a random range whenever we make VFX, because it just makes it that extra bit nicer to look at, and it just matches the reference a lot better. So do we have any other references I could use? Let's have a look. So these are very slow embers. Again, you may use, like, you could potentially use the motion for some sort of dust particles. That is one thing I would like to mention, is that today what we make can also be sort of adjusted and reformed into making other effects. For example, these are some very slow embers that float up from maybe a fire. You could also, or like a forest fire, something that's a lot bigger. Or you could also look at just changing them entirely, but still using the same sort of vibe, and you can make them into, well, oh, there we go. You can make them into sort of some dust particles, which may come in handy at some point. This is just what sort of sparks we're going to aim for today. All of these sort of different, well, not make all different examples. We'll do like maybe two. But yeah, as I've got to go through the how it's actually made, the material, and all the modules that we add to it. But without further ado, let's head over to Unreal. So I have Unreal open, and if you remember this from the Unreal download video, you'll be familiar with it. So today we are just going to use the blank, get in the Games tab, the blank, and you want to make sure all of these are kept like they are. You can turn on starter content if you wish, but it doesn't necessarily need to be on for this. So if we just do test map, or you can call it whatever you want, and we click create. I'll just let that create a moment. Now, as mentioned in the last video, the project takes a little bit to create and open up because you're basically making a brand new project from scratch, which needs to compile shaders. So we just need to wait a little bit while that loads. And in the meantime, while that loads, we can also just have a look at some other examples. But yeah, once that reaches 100%, we should be good to go. Although it's like a real life example, this is an example of how they would look if you had collision on. You can see they sort of bounce, hit the floor and bounce in another direction. If we're looking at a games one, there's quite a lot of games ones here. So for example, we're going to probably make something like this. Some simple sparks that sort of bounce out. Then as they hit the ground, they glide along the floor, and they die out. And then there is also this example, which is a little crazy, I must admit, and the smoke isn't necessarily needed. And there is also a couple of examples here in different colors, so I'll show you how to do color adjustment and all that stuff. Everything's loaded in now, perfect. To make things easier, we're going to hit the skylight. Let's hide the landscape. Skylight, click F. Now that's going to take us to the 000 location in the world where we'll do our sparks. And if you remember, to hide this, if we just hit G, and we can turn that on and off to view it. Now we also have the scroll wheel for the camera. We can move around with WASD, scroll wheel for the camera adjustment, and to speed it up, we can scroll wheel forward, slow it down is backwards. So, first things first, in our content folder, we're going to create our own folder and call it VFX. Now I'm gonna do a bit of a structure just to keep you guys, just to keep it clean, and so you guys know the sort of workflow that I tend to work with in my job. So we will have a content folder, and it tends to be the project. And then what you do is inside the project you'd have art, and then you'd have VFX, and then in VFX you'd make your VFX folders. For instance, this one's going to be called Sparks. But of course, since this is a solo project, I've just used VFX and Sparks as the folder. First things first is we want to create ourselves a Niagara system. Then we want to hit next because we want to select it from a random emitter. Now we could use a fountain. However, the fountain already gives us quite a lot of parameters that I would like to add on the fly, so I could explain them as we go along. So in that case, we are going to use ourselves use ourselves an empty emitter and add that. We're going to finish, and we're going to call it NS for Niagara System _ Sparks. Or actually, let's do continuous Sparks. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we're going to open this up. Okay. Wow. This is being real slow. I'm just going to quickly reset the project because it should not be this slow. And it's actually rather difficult to work with that. So if you just give me a moment while I relaunch that. So yeah, the reason why I'm starting with an empty system is because I would like to go over each module that I'm going to add for the Sparks and explain what they do. And then each parameter inside of the Sparks as well. Okay, moving seems... Yep, this seems a lot better. So apologies for that, I just needed to adjust the... I just needed to give it a little bit of a restart. So we give it another save. Now, so we have our continuous Sparks Niagara system. We'll build it first, and then we can go into making a material to add to it. So, empty system has emitter state, initialized particle, particle state, and sprite renderer. Now, the emitter state is has the life cycle mode and the scalability mode. The one we want to focus on is the life cycle mode. So we're going to change it to self. System just means it works based on the system over here, which is system state. So it's infinite with a loop duration of 5. But we want to control it ourselves, so we are going to make it infinite here with a loop duration of 1. We can also make it infinite once and multiple. Multiple we tend to not use. The reason for that is because if you think of it this way, if you need to make a continuous burst, right, you either use it once to make the sprites burst out once, and then they finish. Now multiple, as you know, as it says, it means you can set the amount it's going to burst, and then you'll finish, right? So you want it to burst 5 times, it's going to burst 5 times. But there are not many use cases for that. You either want it to just last a set duration and then die, or you want it to be infinite and it just goes forever. We tend to not really use the multiple thing because there's not very many use cases for it. So we're going to set ours to, well, it's actually already on infinite, and obviously we can see nothing here right now, but I'm just going over the modules that already exist. So just to go over the one that I missed, this is the properties where we can set our vec to local space, which we're going to do, so we can move it around. Here is where you can change it from CPU to GPU. So first, one thing we are going to do is rename this. So if you just hit F2, or you can just right click and rename emitter, and we're going to call this Sparks. I'm not a big fan of this background, so we're going to be changing that, and the way we do that is by going over to Window, Preview Scene Settings, and it will open this new tab over here, and we're just going to go to Environment. We're going to turn off Show Environment, and I just like to make this a bit more dark, just so we get a little bit more. You can adjust it to what you want. You can make it whatever color you want, but yeah, grey is perfectly fine. And then we're just going to head back over to details. In fact, we could just close that for now, and I don't know what on earth that's doing. That's being super weird. Okay, okay, I'll leave it light, it's fine. Just so we don't get whether that glitch thing was going on there. That was extremely weird. So yeah, the next thing that is automatically in the NT emitter is the initialized particle. Now this is where we set our lifetime. It can set our color, but I'll explain why we when we come to it, that the color itself. Going back to this, we can also set the position mode, which means if we want the particle to spawn elsewhere, we can offset it. Now, depending what the effect is, we can just move the effect entirely with local space, and it will just, like, we can just drag the effect to that. We don't need to use offset. Offset is purely based on if there's 2 effects, 2 emitters, and you have the sparks, sparks on the ground, and maybe you want an additional effect to spawn upwards, like a bit of an explosion or something. You might want to offset the explosion, you know, to be just above on the Z-axis, a little bit taller. Then we have our sprite attributes, our mesh attributes, and our ribbon attributes. The one we want to focus on is the sprite, because we are dealing with sprites today. We have our sprite size mode that we have uniform, random uniform, non-uniform, and random uniform as well. So uniform, set float. We have random uniform, which is 2 floats, but a min and a max. We have non-uniform, which allows us to split the sprite size based on the X and Y axis to make them better into sparks. And we have our random non-uniform, which is, as it states, it's non-uniform but given a min and a max as well. But for today, we are going to set it to random uniform, and we'll leave it like that for now. Now, sprite rotation mode doesn't necessarily matter in our case because we're just focusing on the size, and there's nothing different about the sprite we're going to be using ourselves. They are just going to have random sizes. Basically, because we're going to be using velocity aligned, they won't look any different if they have a different rotation. They're going to look exactly the same, but you know, there is absolutely no harm in turning it on, so we might as well. Sprite UV mode, again, we don't need to worry about it. We can actually just leave that one unset. Now, particle state. This is where we change the particle state of the infinite. So right now the particles kill particles when lifetime has elapsed. Now the lifetime is currently set to 5. Now after this, because we've set the emitter to infinite, like we did at the beginning, it means after 5 seconds the sprites will then decide that they will die and restart the emitter entirely. If we had this set to once, the emitter will never play again until we basically restart the system. But if you turn this off, this makes the particles infinite and they will keep going, and you have these other 2 features as well, which we tend to not use either. Sometimes there's scenarios, but we don't really mess with them as much. We either turn it off to make it infinite, or we turn it on so they die. Now, the biggest one here that I want to explain as we wrap up this first part of the video, so it will be a two-parter. This one was mainly to just give you a feel of where we sort of look to get our sparks motion from, looking at some references, jumping into Unreal, sorting out, you know, just looking at the basic parameters of what's in an empty system. And in the next video, we'll dive straight in, learn more about some modules, as these are called modules, and we shall make the sparks. But to just finish up, we're going to talk about the sprite renderer. Now, the sprite renderer is the bread and butter of the system. If you do not have one of these renderers in here, it's going to mean that your system will not spawn anything and will not do anything. Well, that's not necessarily the case, but that's a whole different thing to talk about. But if you want to see something visually, you will need yourself a sprite renderer. Now, thankfully for Unreal, even though we did not enable the starter content, every time you add a sprite renderer in, or any one of these renderers, they do give you a default sprite material. Now, this is very helpful. However, when I open this up, this is the material, and it is not what we need. This is way too much, and I can't see it at all, actually. Why can I not see it? Is it because of the background? I think. Anyway, this is too much for what we need. We're going to make a lot simpler one, but it's nice to know that they give us a default one that we can work with and then eventually replace it in the end. Now, when I spoke about velocity aligned earlier to mean that this sprite rotation mode won't really matter, we set it here, and you can see we've got unaligned, velocity aligned, custom alignment, and automatic. And then we have the facing mode, which is face camera plane, custom face and vector, face camera position, and face camera distant blend. The main ones we use here are custom alignment and velocity aligned, and the main ones we use here are face camera, custom face and vector, and automatic. Automatic basically acts like face camera, so you don't necessarily need to worry about that. Default pivot in UV space is very useful. It means if your pivot for the particle is center of the particle, you can shove it to one side or up down to the edge of the particle in case you want them to come out from a different angle and fire out differently. A lot of these aren't really used, and then we've got the camera blending, which can be used to sort of help with performance and making sure the particles aren't visible at distances. Then we have our visibility, which is enable. We've got culling distance, which if we turn this on, we have a minimum and maximum culling distance, which will be explained in a video. But that pretty much wraps up this video for the sparks. I hope you guys were able to set this up. And in the next video, we'll dive straight in. We're going to add module by module, and I will explain what they do. And yeah, we should make some cool sparks. And we're just going to dive straight back in so we don't waste any time, because we want to make some sparks. So, first things first, if you remember, we last spoke about the sprite renderer and what was going on in here. First things first is we need to be able to see something. So we're going to go to the emitter particle spawn, and we're going to search for spawn. My apologies, in the emitter update, of course, we're going to search for spawn. But they also are defaulted up here, and we want to go with spawn rate, which is set to 0, and we're going to set it to 10. So now, if you just zoom in by holding right-click in and dragging to the right and left, you can zoom in and out. You can see we have some sparks. Well, not sparks, we have some sprites. We have some sprites. Of course, right now, they're not doing anything. Quick, brief explanation of what else is involved in here is just a spawn probability, which if you turn it on, it's 100% of the time that the spawn probability of the spark of the sprite spawning. If you hit 0, nothing's going to spawn. If you hit 0.5, 50% chance a sprite will spawn. But we aren't going to use this, so we are going to turn it off, and we're going to have them spawn 100% of the time for the moment. Next thing is we need ourselves some velocity. So we're going to add velocity, and it's going to give you a warning. And it's because we don't have the solve forces and velocity module and the initial forces module. All you have to do is fix issue, and then it puts the solve forces and velocity module in particle update. Now you can see our lovely sprites are going in the air with a default of 50, which we can turn this down to 30 for the moment. Actually, we can leave it at 50. But we also would like to make the velocity mode into a cone. That's from point, my bad, into a cone. And now you can see they are going on the x-axis because that is what we've set to here. We've got a cone angle, which, as you suspect, determines whether or not to make it bigger. And we can go on a bigger axis as well, so that means this goes one whole side of the cone. But we're going to keep that at 45 for the moment. Then we have our velocity, which we can put that to 50. Now, they're moving very slow, and the reason for that is because the lifetime of them is extremely long. So we're going to go back to the initialized particle and set it to 1. So that means they disappear rather quickly. But if we speed this up to 500, they absolutely fly out, which is exactly what we want. But as we go along, we're going to give some things random ranges. As I spoke, you know, you always want to make things random range because everything's not perfect. So in the initialized particle, we're going to hit the drop down and we're going to go to random range float, or you can search for it, random range float, and we're going to give it a lifetime of 0.8 to 1.5. So this will have some die after 0.8, and this have some die after 1.5 seconds. Same for the velocity, we're going to give it a random range. We're going to say maybe 250 to 500, or maybe 250 to 750, so some go quite far, and then some 550, that's fine. So we have that. Now, if we just save this, and we go in here, and we give ourselves a cube, as I showed you last time, to go into this little add, shapes, cube, get ourselves a cube, and set the put it flat on the ground like so. Let's just drag it over here near the 0, 0 line, and let's pop our sparks, and we can it will sort of snap, so we can just snap it there, and you can see because we're using the x-axis is actually following the green massive green arrow, lime green arrow, and if we rotate it, because we have local position on, it's going to perfectly stay still, although I will admit the sun is a little bit in the way, so let's just rotate both of these so it's this way instead. There we go, that's better. So we have ourselves some particles coming out. We'll give us a save the level. Let's just go to test map. I'm going to save into here, so this will save a brand new level in as you create it, like here. So every time you open this project, you need to double click on the test map, and then it will open up your stuff here. Now, back to sparks. We have ourselves our sparks. Now, the next thing we want to do is add some gravity. So we're going to go into the the particle update, and we're going to have gravity force. Now, gravity force defaults to a real life gravity force number, which is really random, but it's negative 980. So although it gives you the option to edit it, it gives you the option to change it, you know, you could even go positive, make it fly upwards in a curl. I would not mess with that. I would do it in other things and use other forces. Gravity should just stay as it is. If you would like to mess around with that, there are other ways of doing it. For instance, there is a module called linear force, and you could give this a positive 1000, and then your particles will sort of fall down but also fly up as well, and if you need them to all fly up, just hit a bigger number and so forth. You can use other things like that. We're not using that today, but I just thought I'd explain that, to always keep gravity force at negative 980. So, as you see now, we've got our particles flying out, but then they're dropping down. Now, they're dropping down quite quickly, and this is a very big waste of particles, because if you just wanted them to fly out and then sort of die, they should really die before they hit under the ground, because if you go under the ground, you can see they don't die until all the way down here, which is a big waste. So they need to be visible for the duration of the character or the player being able to see them, right? If they're going under the ground, they should just die. So the way to fix that is, first of all, we're going to increase the velocity. So now, as they fly out, they're going to go further, which means less of them are going to go under here. But of course, they're still dying. Well, not dying. They're still going under the ground and not doing much. First of all, I'm going to do it the easiest way, the more expensive way, and we're going to add a module in particle update called collision. Now, the only thing you really need to change is the restitution, which is how much they bounce, and the friction. As you can see, they're bouncing around, which is awesome, but it's always nice, again, to give a random range. So let's do 0.3 to 0.6, and then we have ourselves the friction, which is how much they stick to the floor after impacting, so we can do 0.25 to 1. Actually, that's a bit too heavy. Let's do 0.15 to 0.25. Or 0.3. Awesome. So now the sparks are no longer wasted. They're not going under the ground because they're sticking to the floor and they are visible. Now this is the best way to represent normal sparks as they are in everyday life, because obviously sparks do not fall through the ground. So we shall continue like this. And another thing is a very handy module that should be used in every effect is drag. Now drag basically, as it implies, it stops it from going as far needed. So like if I set this to 10 for example, you can see the particles are getting dragged behind and leaving a splodge at the bottom here. So the best way is to always just use a really low drag, but also give it a random range, and then that way they still are going a little bit fast, so maybe 1 to 2. Yeah, that's perfect. And then we have ourselves our sprites sort of bouncing outwards, and they sort of don't go out as far due to the drag. Now, of course, they don't look like sparks, they just look like circles flying out of a square, which is exactly what it is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to save this, and we're going to make ourselves a material. Now, the way I like to do this is put the material in the same folder that I'm making the effect in, and I'm going to call it m_radial actually. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to grab a node with right click called radial gradient exponential. Now if I preview this, you can see it's a sprite, which is what we want. But in order to control it and make it less confusing like the other one, we want to add ourselves a particle color to be able to control the color of the particle and the opacity of the particle in Niagara. We want to change our master node to blend mode to translucent, and we want to change the shading model for performance to unlit. Now if it's lit, it means we have access to metallic, specular, roughness, base color, which we don't need because we just want to have the emissive channel and we just want to make them bright and orange-ish. Next, we want to hit M on a keyboard and left click twice for multipliers. We want to plug the RGB to control the color into the multiplier, as well as into the radial gradient and into the emissive color. We then want to grab, as you can see, we've got ourselves a sprite, but because the background is, in fact, one moment, this would be very helpful to show you, because it's black. Right, there we go. Because it's black, and we've got nothing in the opacity, there is a black border, and I have black background so you can see it. Now, we plug the alpha channel into the multiplier and then the B into the radial and plug that into the opacity. We have ourselves a sprite, which doesn't have a background anymore. Now, sorry for it flickering in and out, that's really strange, I've never witnessed that before. We can also turn it two-sided, but because the particles are camera facing, we do not need this. This is only for if your particles need to be seen from another angle. But if that's specific and has something else that needs to be on the other side. But in this case, because we are using camera facing, don't need two-sided on. And two-sided is a costly thing because it's rendering both sides of the sprite. Just keep it off if you're using camera facing. That's a #1 tip. And thankfully it is defaulted to two-sided off. So it means you don't necessarily, if you forget, you don't need to worry about it. Right. So now we're going to head over to the sprite renderer and we're going to change this to the only material we have in this project because I didn't have start content, nRadial. Now we have ourselves our own sprites. which if I hold Control and R, I can freeze real time, and I can go and have a look at these particles just to make sure. And yep, they are our particles we are using. And I can either hit this button or hit Control R again, and real time comes back. Now if we just give this a save. Now, this is a lot more basic than the one we saw. A lot more easier to understand. So we have ourselves that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to change this alignment to velocity aligned. And we're going to, well, we could leave it on automatic, but for this purpose, I'll change it to face camera. So that means no matter which way we look at it, all the particles are going to be facing the camera. In fact, let me just double check something. Yeah, that's fine. Awesome. Next thing we want to do is we want to make them look like sparks. So we're going to add a brand new module, scale sprite by speed. Now, the default of this, I apologize for this flickering, I have no idea where it's coming from, it's actually quite annoying. I'll just leave it zoomed out, that seems to fix it. We've got min scale factor and the max scale factor. So the min is the difference in which the x-axis, which tends to be the ones that we want to keep small, so we're going to do 0.5 to 1, and then this is the ones we want to tend to make bigger, so we're going to do like maybe 3 to 6. And you can start to see they have started to shape into a lovely bit of sparks. They are a little thick. We are going to fix that by making the 0.3, make these longer by 5, and drop this down to 0.6 and make this 10. So now they are even sharper. That's a little too much, I think. Let's do 7 to 4. Maybe I could leave this on 0. Yeah, that works. If I just leave the mins on 0 and then just have these at this, it sort of helps. But that's not the only thing we're doing. So, in fact, let's just put these back because I know I've missed something. So, we want to add scale sprite size next, just a normal one, and it's going to give us an automatic curve, and we have options to uniform, we have options to non-uniform and non-uniform curve, but we just want uniform curve. So this means the sprite on spawn are going to start off really small and then they'll gradually appear over time. Now this works, however they are way too small in the beginning, so what we want to do is change it to a hill, and we're going to scale, just grab the point and move it upwards till it's about halfway. So that means the sparks will fly out. Or actually, let's use this default curve is better. Is that better? No, that's still a bit too much. Let's go with this one. But we're going to do something. So we're going to hit right click. We're going to change it to, we're going to break it. And we're going to change it to weighted tangents. And then when we grab this point, we can put it up like this, but we can then drag it back while dragging down, and we can make sure that they are spawning a lot closer, like so. Now that works rather nicely. So we're going to save that, and we have ourselves some sparks. Now, next thing we want to do is add some colour. Now there are multiple ways. Oh, actually, first of all, let's fix this issue. So you can see as some of them hit, they then point upwards. That's due to the where is it? The collision. We have advanced aging rate turned off. So if we hit this and turn it to 10, you can see as soon as they hit the ground, they survive for a little bit and then they slowly die, and that stops them from pinging upwards. Of course, if we were to do a really high number, like 50, they'll die as soon as they hit the ground, which obviously we don't want. So we can give this a random range, and we can do like 5 to 10 maybe. Yeah, that works. So that sort of stops them from pinging upwards straight and solves that bug that we have. The spawn rate, let's up it to 30. So we have a lot of sparks going on there. Lovely. In fact, you know what, we could even set it to 50. And then we have a gradual sprite size, which is here. So if we do like, made this 100, obviously it's very insane, but we could set this to 10, and we could set this one to 2, so there's a good size range going on there, like so. The main thing that's missing is the fact that it doesn't have any colour. Now I've left this to last because it's one of the more important ones and one of the more ones where you can do multiple things with it. For example, you could multiply in a color with a multiplier and then hit 3 on your keyboard. You could pick a color here, pick orange, yellow, plug that into the multiplier, and you could replace the particle color with this, and then you have yourselves an orange sprite, and then when you save it, you've got yourselves your sparks. Not much control here, I'll be honest. So I tend to not often add sparks colors in here, so we're not going to do that. Then you have your second option, which is to use the particle color module and change color mode in initialize particle to direct set, sorry, and then just change the color to an orangey color here, and then we have the same result as before. It's just set in Niagara, not the material. And then you would need to do something to give it a nice sort of fade out. Now you can add yourselves a scale color, and you could change the scale alpha to a float and change it to, well, not a curve, change it to a heel, but in the other way. So that means they nicely fade out, which looks quite nice. However, that takes 2 things to do. So you have to add the module, and then you set the color here. And maybe you don't want all the sparks to be the same shade of color, or maybe it's very hot at the beginning, like some of them examples. So maybe you want to do it a different way, and that is the way I will show you. So we're actually going to unset this color, we're going to delete scale color, and we're going to add a module called color, and it gives a default color again. Of course we can set whatever color we wish, but we're going to change it to a color from curve. Now what this allows us to do is if we set this to orange, it starts off orange and then goes into white. So as you can suspect, what we're going to do is we're going to set the last color to an orangey color, and we're going to set this first color to more of a yellow, and we're going to go in the V and give it about a 20, maybe, something like that. So we have some emissive, and then we can sort of drag the orange back so they start off hit, maybe not orange, let's go with, in fact these should be orange, this should be orange, not necessarily, yeah, that's better. So we do that, and then we could add another one and then sort of make it a little more red. So they start off a bit yellow, and then when they sort of reach the ground they cool down a bit, go into a bit more of an orange. And then we could also make that lifetime a little bit longer, and we could do 2 to 3 maybe. Yeah, so they last a bit longer, look a bit better. We have ourselves some sparks right there. Last thing I would like to add, just to make them spawn a bit better from something, as some of those examples. So if we just copy this and then paste it, and we're going to call this sparks end or start, spark start. And we're just going to get rid of the velocity module. We're going to get rid of the gravity force, the collision, and then we're going to spawn, what's it going on there? We are going to, I think we can get rid of, let's see. Oh, no, we need that. There we go. Get rid of velocity lines. That was it. So we can keep all of them, and then we've got ourselves a bit of a start, but of course they last very long. So we're going to change the lifetime to 0.5 to 1. That's still a bit, oh, to 12, 1. Still a bit too fast, so let's do 0.15 to 3. Perfect. We have ourselves a little bit of a nice start going on there. Which looks quite nice actually. I like that. That's a bit more of a stylized look. Yeah, it works. And they match the same color as the sparks do there. And of course, if there's too much sparks there. If you want to know how many sort of particles you're spawning, in here I know they go down, but they do die here quicker. You can see they're not going underground because of the collision module. So this is the sort of the sparkler example I was talking about, using it as a bit of a header. If you want to know the particle count and how much sort of particles you're spawning, you can go over to show and then do particle counts, and you can see in the first sparks you're spawning around 130, which is quite a lot, and that's because the lifetime is so high. If I were to halve this or reduce it by 1 second, it won't even peak 100, it peaks 80, which in fact actually doesn't look too bad, so we'll keep it under 100, like so. And then the other one, although we've got a spawn rate of 50, because the lifetime is so low, it only reaches around 13 maximum. So yeah, you could even up the spawn rate of this to 100 and you'd probably only reach 25. And you could see that looks a bit better. What I will want to do quickly is just investigate, well not investigate, show you guys some sort of burst sparks in this last 5 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to close this, close the material, we don't need that. We're just going to right click and duplicate, and we're going to call this ns_burst sparks. We're going to open it up. For the moment, we are going to just disable this one while we work on this one. And honestly, there isn't too much we need to change, but I will go through it. So instead of spawn rate, we're going to delete that, which then obviously causes nothing to spawn. We're going to choose spawn burst, which is defaulted to 1, as you can see, but if we hit that to 50, we have some sparks bursting off like so. And then what we want to do is turn on our spark start as well, but instead we want to change this to spawn burst as well, and probably do this a low number of 20 or something like that. Let's see, is that enough? Yeah, that seems about enough. Also this is probably a bit too many, so let's put that down to 30. Save that, and then I want to put this in the scene like so. Let's put it a bit further up, and then these could probably be a little bigger, 5 to 10, since it is a bit of a burst. We can leave it like that. You don't necessarily need to have these, you could turn them off and they'd still be fine, like some random sparks bursting from a pipe. In fact, we could just leave it off now, we don't necessarily need that. And then we could sort of lower the velocity a bit because it's a bit too high. We could do that. And then one thing I would wanted to show you guys is something I mentioned earlier, which is in the spawn burst, which also does have the spawn probability. So we could turn that on and we could random range that to 0.25 to 1. So that means every so often it's not going to spawn. So here it took a little while for it to spawn again. And yeah, that gives yourself a bit more control. And we have made ourselves some continuous sparks, and we have made ourselves some normal sparks. Since I have a couple more minutes left, I just want to show you the cheaper version of making some sparks without using collision. So if I just duplicate the collision continuous one again and just do call it no collision at the end, we're going to pop this on the other side of the cube, and then as you can see, the problem with this right now is because we've got collision enabled, they're all clipping in. But if I just turn that module off or delete it, let's save this one and close that. You can see they're perfectly going through the ground, and if we just rotate this round, they are now flying out. So the way we want to fix that, and you can see here, you can see it sort of clip through, is in the material. We want to add something called the depth fade. Now this only works for translucent and additive materials. It doesn't work for masked or opaque. So if we search for it, it basically allows us to fade the particle when it comes into contact with the surface. So if we just attach the opacity to the multiplier and then plug it into opacity, visually nothing changes. But if we save this in the material, nothing changes. Save this, go into here, nothing changes in here. But now you can see, if you just pause, that particle has started to fade because it's come into contact with this wall, and you can see here these particles have all faded because they're so close to this wall. So now you can see they're not as bright as they once were. And these particles do the same thing. Gradually as they hit the ground, they fade out a lot nicer. Now this helps especially in cases where we're not allowed to use collision due to performance, because it sort of shows that they're sort of dying, hitting the ground and dying. Now to help with this case, another thing we can do is if we go over to the scale, we can also make it a hill, and we can say that the sprite, they're also a very long lifetime. My apologies, that is also another thing. So if we set these to 0.5 to 1, you can see that they fall, but they don't fall as low anymore. So if you just go under the ground, they're still falling under the ground, but of course the best way to solve that is by giving yourself some more velocity. And then if that's too much for them to fly out, you can also up the drag as well to compensate for that. Which I shall produce this again. Now one thing you can do as well, considering they are still falling, is you can give them a shorter lifetime again, like just make it like 0.3 to 0.5, which obviously stops them here, which barely even touch the ground. But then of course, because their lifetime's so low now, you could up the spawn rate, okay, not that much, you could up the spawn rate to 100, and then you could give it a bigger velocity range here now, and you could do this so they sort of go out all the way over there. It sort of works. It's a good, like, the material depth fade is definitely the biggest win here, because you've still got them sort of flying outwards relatively differently to this, and that's mainly because the velocity is higher than the gravity force. So I guess maybe lowering this to 0 to 1 probably is a good solution, and the lifetime is probably way too short, so I need to up that a little bit more so they actually have some falling into it. Let's have a look, maybe that was a little too high. So yeah, this is sort of what I mean. Of course they're still going to go through the grounds because you just can't avoid that, because you haven't got collision turned on. Yeah, that is how to do sparks without involving collision. Basically the same thing, apart from you just sort of hide where the sparks sort of like hit the ground. Another thing you can sort of do is in the scale sprite is to make these both 0, so it means as they reach the grounds they actually shrink a lot quicker, I think. Or is that just the beginning? No, sorry, that's the beginning, so that means this should be 1 3 0 0, I think. Well, you can mess around with this, but this obviously this is just better if you just leave this as it is to get the sort of length of the sprites, which I think that was at 7. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, this works, of course, but yeah, you just miss out on the collision, which is more of a realistic thing and based on performance. Yeah, you can save this project out, you can remake them, you can change the color of whatever sparks you wish. You can give them give this a hot blue at the beginning, and you could have some really nice sort of random colors. Of course, that's not very realistic, but you know, why not? That is the sparks video. Hope you guys have been able to learn something. I hope you have made some awesome sparks. If you would like to learn this as a profession from scratch, the course will include things such as simple effects. So we're talking fire, we're talking sparks, some lightning. The course will end with making a very cool hologram effect, which if I give you a sneak peek, will be something similar to this. And I shall come back, because if you would like to go and check that out, you can see it for yourself, but it's better to create it from the video in Scratch. And then we will finish off with just an upload video, very short video, just explaining how we're going to upload our work to ArtStation as a VFX artist and show it off to everyone. Because as a VFX artist, we cannot just do pictures, we cannot do high quality images. They have to be high quality videos in order to get every single detail that we've applied to our effects in there, and we want to make it attractive by making ourselves a nice thumbnail as well. Right guys, that was it for the free course. You can check out the program regarding more complex effects. Thanks for watching.